Let me ask you, just shift gears on the aid issue. ProPublica published a report saying that Israel deliberately blocked humanitarian aid to Gaza, and there were two U.S. government bodies that told that to the Secretary of State, but he basically rejected it. And in fact, he told Congress that that in fact Israel was allowing aid to go in. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I will, and I'm glad you asked me this question, because I think there have been a lot of misperceptions about what happened that I do want to clear up. So it is not at all uncommon when the United States government is looking at difficult questions for different agencies inside the United States government to come to differing conclusions, or different bureaus and components inside an agency to come to differing conclusions. And that's what happened here. You had a number of components of the department that were making recommendations. You had other agencies inside the U.S. government outside the State Department who were providing information to the Secretary. And when the Secretary got all those recommendations, in a number of meaningful ways, they conflicted. You had some people making one set of recommendations and other people making, if not diametrically opposed recommendations that conflicted. And so that's not an unusual thing. That happens all the time when making difficult decisions. And so what the Secretary did is what we always try to do, which is to sift through those conflicting recommendations, look at the underlying information, and make the best judgments we can. And the judgment that we ultimately made, if you read the National Security Memorandum, and I think a lot of this has been lost by people who have forgotten in the months since it was released what it said, that report was quite clear in identifying that there were a number of steps that Israel had taken or not taken that had led to the hindrance of humanitarian aid being delivered to Gaza, and that we were quite concerned about those steps. But in the meantime, they had implemented a number of additional measures that we had recommended to them to improve the delivery of humanitarian assistance. And it is looking at all of those factors together, where the situation had been and where it had gone, that led the Secretary to come to the conclusion that he made. So it is far more complicated than the kind of headline or tweet version of this situation that I know often gets written up. I will say, the final thing I will say about that is, this is an ongoing situation where we constantly monitor the situation, identify deficiencies, engage with the government of Israel, engage with the UN and humanitarian partners in the region to try to correct those deficiencies, and then move forward. And our assessments, because we're not done making those assessments, will continue.
Can I follow up on that?
Yeah, Tom, go. Oh, yes.
Just a specific follow-up on that. You talked about these different parts of the State Department making different recommendations. In the ProPublica story, and I guess we know about this from the NSM, but if you were going to look to parts of the U.S. government to tell you on the specific question of whether a country is blocking the delivery of humanitarian aid, wouldn't you look to USAID and PRM in this building? Aren't they exactly the two parts of the government that you would ask that question?
So I would look to them. I would also look to our experts in the region, our experts in the bureaus that cover the region, as well as other U.S. government agencies. And that's what we did. And without speaking to the recommendation of any individual component, any individual bureau or agency, because it wouldn't be appropriate for me to do that, the Secretary got conflicting recommendations and had to resolve those.
Doesn't it suggest, and isn't the Secretary's decision based on recommendations? He's taken the expert recommendation on that specific humanitarian question and considered it looking at the political and strategic other influences and made a decision. But the actual technical advice from the two agencies involved in that specifically was that they are blocking it.
So this is not a comment about the question, but it is a comment about some of the criticism that the Secretary has received. One of the things that I have found over the years in government is when there are conflicting reports, the side that had the opinion that you agreed with was the expert side, and the other side was a bunch of political hacks. And that is always the way that people interpret these. We look at it as all of these officials who made recommendations had expertise, and the Secretary valued all of their expertise equally, and ultimately took their recommendations, but also dived into the underlying facts and dived into not just looking backwards months and months and months, but what the change in the situation and the change in the delivery of humanitarian assistance when we made that assessment, and found that to be just as important as the events that had happened in the previous months. And the report's language reflected all of that. We were quite transparent about how we had seen the situation change over time.
Wait a second. I don't understand how you can say the Secretary valued all their expertise equally when he rejected the side that
So you can value someone's expertise and still disagree with. I value very much your reporting, Matt. I disagree with some of the stories that you write. You can value.
well, first of
someone-
all, I question that.
You can value someone's
second of all-
expertise and still disagree at times with their recommendations when you have conflicting information. It's just.
Wait, so there was conflicting information
You had
that suggested that.
conflicting assessments from different bureaus inside the department.
Okay, but assessments were based on facts on the ground, right?
They were based on.
Right?
They were.
What was happening on the ground?
So it's not just.
So unless one of these two bureaus just got it wrong and didn't, then they were giving their
No, it is.
their assessment was based on the facts.
No,
right?
it is not just the assessment of facts on the ground, but how facts changed over time, which is one of the things we laid out in the report, that if you looked at the actions by the government of Israel, and as important as actions at time inaction, things that we had recommended they do that they didn't take, we concluded that some of the actions they took and some of the inactions, things that they hadn't done, had led to a slowdown in delivery of humanitarian assistance. But we had intervened with them, and they had taken a number of meaningful steps in another direction that led us to make the assessment that we did.
To the point where now everything is just fine.
As I said, it is an ongoing assessment, and we constantly see deficiencies that we try to alleviate. The situation is nowhere